Okay, but how many disabled people could there be? How many people is this going to benefit? Hi, my name is Marie, and I'm putting out a series of instructional videos on how to make your workshops, your workplaces, and your in person and online events more inclusive. And one of the questions I get the most often is, but just how many people with disabilities are we talking about here? And isn't that just a whole lot of effort for a very small number of people? The reality is, we're actually looking at a very large number of people. One in five, or close to 20% of the population, has a number of access needs. That is according to the European Disability Forum, and organizations of disabled people in North America come up with similar statistics. Yes, one in five. That's a lot more than people expect. To understand this number, you also need to understand that disability comes in many forms. Disabilities may not always be visible to you, and people may not always self identify as a disabled person. But it doesn't mean that they don't have access needs. This is why you will sometimes hear me refer to people with disabilities and people with access needs. One of the ways to best understand access needs is to have governments ask their citizens something called the Washington set of questions. The American Community Survey, which is run by the American Census Bureau, that very same one that runs a census of the American population every 10 years, has questions that are very similar to that of the Washington Group set of questions. They're asking people questions like, do you have trouble seeing things, even with your glasses on? Do you have difficulty dressing or bathing? Do you have difficulties doing errands alone, like visiting a doctor or going grocery shopping, because of a physical, mental, or emotional condition? Do you have trouble making decisions or remembering things? Do you have difficulties walking or going upstairs? Do you have trouble hearing? These questions focus on the functioning and the gaps in functioning that may exist that people may need support with. And this support can come with assistive technology or devices or other forms of support and adjustments in the world around them. Just before the pandemic, the American Community Survey estimated that about 2% of the population had a visual disability, 3.5% had a hearing disability, over 6% had an ambulatory disability, almost 5% had a cognitive disability, about 2.5% had what they called a self-care disability. This is for the people who had trouble dressing or bathing, and over 4.5% had an independent living disability, meaning that they had trouble doing errands alone. This is for the American population, but it gives us a pretty good look at what it could look like for us in Europe. In the UK, the Click Away Pound survey of 2019 estimated that 10 million internet users in the UK have disabilities. That would be about 15% of the population, of which 7.15 million have access needs while using the internet. That would be about 11% of the UK population. Okay, so now that we've established that people with disabilities could be anywhere between 15 or 20% of the population in European or North American countries, and that anywhere between 10 and 15% of internet users might have access need, I hope we have a clear case now that people with disabilities are not a tiny sliver of the population. And fair enough, some of them will find themselves in an age group that you would not typically find in your company's workforce or at your events. I hope that these statistics are compelling enough to convince you to make your work environments, your events, and your workshops more accessible. In future videos, I hope to establish the business case for employing people with disabilities and show you that because a rising tide lifts all boats, many accessibility adjustments end up benefiting a much wider group than the one you implemented them for. In the next video, I'll talk about language and which terms we prefer to use when talking about disability. I know there's quite a bit of anxiety around using the correct terms and not accidentally using very outdated or potentially offensive terms. So I'll be covering those as well as the ones that you should definitely retire. I will also be covering the myths that we build around accessibility, how we can make documents, events, workshops more accessible, along with a checklist. I'll be talking about the European Accessibility Act, the ADA, Section 508, the Equality Act, and other laws that create accessibility requirements. I'll be talking about the World Wide Web Consortium and WCAG 2.1. I'll be showing you how you can test your website for accessibility and to find out if the apps that you use in your everyday business are accessible for your disabled employees and stakeholders. Follow me if you want to see more of this content. Do not hesitate to post your questions below if you have any content you'd like me to cover. See you in the next video.